We're going to get started on October 5th, 2025. I've been playing around with doing talk about this book, which I'll get into. And I was always like, I got to get it organized. And then there was an opening to do it this week. And I was like, I guess I just need a hard deadline. So I started working on this like on Tuesday. So it's either going to be short or extremely long because I'm completely time blind, but I have a lot of cool information to share. So I want to welcome you, members, friends, guests. I'm Chad Towarnicki. I'm the vice president this year with the UFP. I'm very happy to serve on the board. I've learned a ton from this community. And I guess we've been coming for about 3 years, but I'm very, very thankful. Every time I'm in here, I pretty much say I'm very thankful to be part of this community. And I'm happy to welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Scholarship of Pottstown. Since 1967, we've been a warm and welcoming liberal community in Pottstown. Our founders poured their hearts, resources, talents into creating this actual building, this special place, and together we carry on their inspiring legacy. In their spirit, we continue their mission of nurturing spiritual journeys, embracing diversity, celebrating community, and turning values into actions. We hope today you leave here feeling inspired in your spirit and in your home. So before we move on to announcements, I just want to thank Miss Emily for helping me figure out the tech because I thought I was being really smart about it, and I'm hoping it works. Kay Price will be playing piano for us. And I believe Brittany and Ruby, is they Brittany? Miss Brittany? Okay, so then we have Valerie and Miss Ruby, hopefully, will be our RE teachers. I do have one more announcement before anybody else wants to line up and start with announcements. In the spirit of having more people up here and different voices being shared, Miss Emily shared with me basically like a rough template of either a lay leader or somebody, if you were interested in doing a talk of your own. I'm in the process of setting it up where those documents could be online and you could just access a template that you could modify as you go through. We're just trying to encourage more people to have a diversity of voices up here, a diversity of thought. That's kind of what makes this community strong. It makes me think of Miss Valerie's This I Believe talk that we had, or Diane's conversation last week was really good. But I'm trying to lower the barrier eventually for more people to get up here and try. So if you're interested, I would love to share those templates with you. And we could have a seasoned lay leader kind of shepherd you through the process. I will say it takes longer than you think to put it together. But with that being said, is there anybody else who has an announcement that you would like to share?
Hi, I'm Kay. This is an announcement for social justice. Irene can't be here today, so I'm encouraging everyone to accept the email from her about the October 18th protest in Pottstown. And all you have to, she's going to send another one out. She sent one out about a week later. So I'm encouraging you to come to the protest. We, the Unitarians, have a special corner we stand on right as you drive in. You're very welcome. You don't even have to bring a sign. They have signs there. So anyway, she's going to send out another email today with a link. All you have to do is click on the link and you can sign up for the protest. They like to know how many people are coming, etc. So we have a host for these protests in Pottstown. It's just a person that is doing her thing for the country. So I think that's pretty cool. And it's 10 to 12 on a Saturday morning. So please consider coming out and also RSVPing on the link. Thank you.
Morning, my name's Monica. I am the board president. Sorry, I'm standing like this. Sorry. If you're going to go to the protest, consider buying a UFP shirt. If you would like to, there's a link out here. It's a fundraiser for our church. Also, fundraiser for our church. Holly Brinton, who is a member, she is going to be doing a yoga series starting the 7th, which is this Tuesday. If you would like to sign up, you can prepay for 4 classes, it's $80, or you can drop in for $25. It's gonna go for 4 weeks. It's every other week, and I have her contact information if you would like to sign up. Thank you.
Morning, I'm Valerie. Since we have a fair number of faces today, I just wanted to reiterate that I am planning to do the craft raffle again like last year. So if you are someone who would like to contribute to that, no matter what you do, last year we had candles, paper, paintings, knitting, so many, honey, wine, homemade wine. We had so many great contributions last year, and it's October now. So if you'd like to contribute, it's a good time to start.
A real quick announcement, my surgery's been pushed out to October 15th, so I'll be out of commission for a couple of weeks. David Sutton has volunteered to take care of the trash and other things that I typically do. So I'll be going over that with him. Hopefully after 2 weeks, I'll be somewhat back to normal, although anesthesia usually takes about 6 weeks to wear off. That's fine. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, I'm Laurie. I haven't done my spiel in a while. As far as a little social justice project, we make dolls that we send to Health Partners International of Canada. They in turn include these dolls with medical kits, which go to countries around the world. So service people and health care practitioners can give these dolls to the children as a comfort, and also as a comfort, to themselves. So if anybody wants to join us in this project and doesn't know how to knit or crochet, the 3rd Sunday is potluck lunch. And after that, I would be happy to stay and teach anybody who's interested in learning to join our project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. One of the main things I've learned in being vice president is so many times things are going on in the world and you wonder like, man, how can I get involved? How can I make a difference? And I feel like our fellowship is such a great example of 100 different ways to get involved, to make a difference, either in a small community or at large. So I'm so thankful for everything that we have going on. Would you be willing to light the chalice? Yeah. So as we light our chalice, we need to be reminded to put our phones into worship mode. The following words are from Albert Thalander and Leslie Pole Cosbaum. We hallow this time together by kindling the lamp of our heritage, flame of fire, spark of the universe that warmed our ancestral heart, agent of life and death, symbol of truth and freedom. We strive to understand ourselves and our earthly home. My first time doing the chime. So for our opening words, I have one of the first letters that Thomas Jefferson wrote after his inauguration as president. And it's in one of the first 5 letters that he wrote after becoming president, was to Joseph Priestley, who is going to be the subject of our conversation today. So the letter, this is just an excerpt from it. Dear sir, I learned some time ago that you were in Philadelphia, but that it was only for a fortnight, and I suppose you are now gone. It was not until yesterday I received information that you were still there and had been very ill, but are now in recovery. I sincerely rejoice that you are in recovery. Yours is one of the few lives precious to mankind, and for the continuance of which every thinking man is solicitous, bigots with the exception. What an effort, my dear sir, of bigotry and politics and religion have gone through. The barbarians really flattered themselves. They should be able to bring back the times of vandalism, when ignorance put everything into the hands of power and priests. All advances in science were prescribed as innovations. They pretended to praise and encourage education, but it was to be the education of our ancestors, not an education of progress. We were to look backwards, not forwards, for improvement. The president himself declaring in one of his answers to addresses that we were never to expect to go beyond them in real science. This was the real ground of the attacks on you, Mr. Priestley. Those who live by mystery, fearing you would render them useless by simplifying the Christian philosophy, the most sublime and benevolent, but also the most perverted system that had ever shown all man. They endeavored to crush your well-earned and well-deserved fame and notoriety. Our countrymen have recovered from the alarm into which art and industry had thrown them. Science and honesty are replaced back on their high ground, and you, my dear sir, as their greatest apostle, stand at the pinnacle. It is with heartfelt satisfaction that in the first moments of my public action as president, I hail you and welcome you to our land, tender to you the homage of its respect and esteem, cover you under the protection of its laws, which were made for the wise and good like you, and disdain the legitimacy of that libel on legislation, which under the form of law was for the same time placed among them. But I have gone too long into politics when I only meant to express my sympathy in the state of your health and tender to you all the affections of public and private hospitality. I should be very happy to meet you in person indeed. I leave this about the 30th to return about the 25th of April. If you do not leave Philadelphia before that, a little excursion hither would help your health. I should be much gratified with the possession of a guest I so much esteem and should claim a right to lodge you, should you make such an excursion. I found that letter to be really interesting because with all the talk of the United States being a Christian nation, I never learned that Thomas Jefferson's, one of his first letters was to a UU minister. So I found that really interesting. Our first hymn is going to be hymn number 331. Life is the greatest gift of all. And if you would stand as you are willing and able. We move now to a story of all ages. So if any of our young members want to come up and grab a blanket, Miss Justine's going to read a story that is very Joseph Priestley-esque called What Do You Do with an Idea?
Right. What do you do with an idea? Have you guys ever read this before? Yeah. You have? One day I had an idea. Where did it come from? Why is it here? I wondered, what do you do with an idea? At first, I didn't think much of it. It seemed kind of strange and fragile. I didn't know what to do with it, so I just walked away from it. I acted like it didn't belong to me. It followed me. I worried what others would think. What would people say about my idea? I kept it to myself, I hid it away, and didn't talk about it. I tried to act like everything was the same as it was before my idea showed up. But there was something magical about my idea. I had to admit, I felt better and happier when it was around. It wanted food, it wanted to play. Actually, it wanted a lot of attention. It grew bigger and we became friends. I showed it to other people, even though I was afraid of what they would say. I was afraid that if people saw it, they would laugh at it. I was afraid they would think it was silly. And many of them did. They said it was no good. They said it was too weird. They said it was a waste of time and that it would never become anything. And at first I believed them. I actually thought about giving up on my idea. I almost listened to them. But then I realized, what do they really know? This is my idea, I thought. No one knows it like I do. And it's okay if it's different and weird and maybe a little crazy. I decided to protect it, to care for it. I fed it good food, I worked with it, I played with it. But most of all, I gave it my attention. My idea grew and grew, and so did my love for it. I built it a new house, one with an open roof, where you look up at the stars, a place where it could be safe to dream. I liked being with my idea. It made me feel more alive, like I could do anything. It encouraged me to think big and then to think bigger. It shared its secrets with me. It showed me how to walk on my hands, because it said, it is good to have the ability to see things differently. I couldn't imagine my life without it. Then one day, something amazing happened. My idea changed right before my very eyes. It spread its wings, took flight, and burst into the sky. I didn't know how to describe it, but it went from being here to being everywhere. It wasn't just a part of me anymore. It was now part of everything. And then I realized what you do with an idea and change the world. What, I just have one question for you guys. Who do you think benefits the most from sharing your ideas? Is it yourself, other people, or something else and someone else? Add it to one. Yourself. The world. The world. Oliver, what do you think? Think about it as yourself, someone else. You don't know. Something to think about, you guys.
Okay, so with that outstanding reading. We're now gonna sing the It's Off to RE. Go get it, go get it. now is the time for our offering. Giving is not about duty, it's an invitation to invest in the life of this community, to nurture its spirits, and to carry its mission forward. We now receive the morning offering with open hands and open hearts. And if you're just visiting for the time, your presence is a gift enough. Okay, so I was inspired to do this talk about Joseph Priestley because of this book. It's called The Invention of Air, and I'm finally ready to relinquish this book. I've been reading it over and making notes and stuff too much. So somebody please take it. He's a really interesting historical figure in general, just to learn about the type of person he was. But specifically, I stumbled into him trying to learn more and more about what it means to be UU, like what it actually means to be Unitarian Universalist. Kind of like what I'm actually signing up for and spending my family's time with. I want to learn some of the early people who influenced this religion or this movement, this ideology. Specifically for us, he's an interesting figure because our fellowship is actually in the Joseph Priestley region, which is pretty much just Pennsylvania. Most of the Pennsylvania, I think some Delaware congregations fall into the Joseph Priestley region. So I thought we ought to do a deep dive on him and learn a little bit more about him. This region carries his name because near the last decade of his life, he spent in Pennsylvania, in Northumberland, PA. He was a highly, highly accomplished scientist, a deeply influential political voice, and a philosophical and religious renegade that played a hand in founding UU ministry at large. So Priestley started his career, I tried to cut my talk down and cut his childhood out, but his academic and working career, he actually started as a fanboy of the scientists of the time living in England. And he was the biggest fanboy of somebody who actually held the position of Postmaster General of London, who was a really prominent Enlightenment thinker named Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin hosted the Honest Whigs, which were a group of natural philosophers, which we call now scientists, and they would meet in London coffee houses. So at UUFP, we take our coffee conversations very, very seriously. And this book actually has a really fascinating aside that we might owe the Enlightenment to drinking coffee. So before the Enlightenment, it was harder to come by clean water than you would think. So the cleanest beverage you could actually come across were wine and beer and cider. The United States was really heavy in cider. So, imagine your community or our local society, and the first thing everybody does when they wake up is start drinking beer, and then you drink beer with every meal, and then you go to sleep. It's a very makes for a very relaxed, lethargic, foggy-minded community. So introducing coffee into this network, compared to alcohol as a depressant, coffee is a stimulant. So now you have all these people waking up and pursuing these ideas and going at it with more energy, more clear-minded, more industrious. So just really interesting to think about the relationship between coffee and the Enlightenment era. But Priestley and Benjamin Franklin, and they were directly benefited from this, meeting routinely in coffee houses. So it was Joseph Priestley, who was a young upstart historian of the natural philosophers. He wanted to record all these amazing experiments and scientific studies that these people were creating. And he wanted to meet the Honest Whigs in person and request that he could write basically their group's biography, which he was calling A History of Electricity. I have page 39. Let me just see if I still want to read this. Sorry to interrupt myself here. Oh, so this was his part of him requesting. This is Joseph Priestley writing what he intended to do. He wanted to demonstrate with complete manner possible, the sameness of electric fluid in the matter of lightning, and this is him writing about Benjamin Franklin. Dr. Franklin, as astonishing as it must have appeared, contrived actually to bring lightning from the heavens by means of an electrical kite, which he raised when a storm of thunder was perceived to be coming on. So capital of discovery this is, the greatest perhaps that has been made in the whole compass of philosophy since the time of Sir Isaac Newton, cannot but give pleasure to all my readers. That's a passage from his History of Electricity, and that's actually the only recorded documentation of Ben Franklin doing his kite experiment. Ben Franklin never wrote about it on his own, and when his son wrote about Ben Franklin doing the kite experiment, he actually referenced that passage from Joseph Priestley's History of Electricity. So the honest Whigs were really impressed and super flattered by this volume that this young historian was willing to write. So they made him an official member of the club, which sent Priestley on a hot streak of his own scientific discoveries because he was using all the newest innovations and inventions. He just studied and recorded all the experiments that this whole collection of geniuses had been doing and documented all the materials that they used. So he became kind of like an expert on the field and then started interacting with the field on his own. And he really did go on an amazing hot streak for a period of about 10 years. So he reflected that as a child, him and his brothers had this kind of morbid game where they would catch spiders and put them in jars and cork the lids and see how long it would take the spider to die. So they would time different types of spiders and with different sized jars and everything. And this was like an early experiments in his scientific career, I guess. And I guess it's better than having kids doom scrolling, but if I was like cleaning my kid's room and there was just clattering of all these jars with dead spiders in them, I would also be concerned. As an adult, and now a member of the natural philosophers and even recognized by the Crown as a scientist, and in regular correspondence with his hero Ben Franklin, Priestley revisited these experiments, but this time using mice. He would capture mice, put them in jars, and time how long it took for them to expire. Using a variety of different sized jars, he produced a variety of different times and tables. And in the spirit of experimentation, he started to turn his attention to putting different living objects in the jars. And he started with what he described as a stubborn mint plant that was growing in his garden. So he started putting mint in the jars and tracking how many hours or days it would take for the mint plant to expire. So Priestley's experimentations had been entirely incorrect because the sprig of mint continued to grow for a full summer. And that led to other mysteries. A candle would now burn inside the jar along the mint. And he would catch mice and put them in the jar with the plant, and they would survive for over 10 minutes while a mouse placed in a plant-free jar in which a mouse had previously expired in, it would begin to convulse and die within seconds. So he was stumbling upon a discovery that somehow this plant was disabling whatever it was that snuffed out the candle, whatever it was that suffocated the previous mouse, this plant was somehow interacting with the nothingness of the jar to create something to change the biochemistry going on in the jar. So basically his discovery was that the empty space surrounding all the solid objects of the world actually wasn't empty space. It wasn't nothing. It wasn't even something. It was some things, because depending on what he put in the jar, had all these different outcomes. So Priestley was obsessed with progress as much as he was with their experimentation. He always wanted to go to the next step, next step, next step. And this led to him publishing all of his works, success or failure, in a Ben Franklin style fashion, and never really wanting credit for it. So he continued combining small insects, mice, plants, lit candles in different combinations Eventually, after spending some time working directly with Franklin during this experimentation for a phase, he realized that he was discovering oxygen, carbon dioxide, and laying the groundwork for later peers to unravel the mystery of photosynthesis. Priestley himself can be credited with discovering 7 of the noble gases, as well as many other scientific discoveries of the time, such as identifying that there's oxygen in human blood. For these discoveries, Priestley is considered a founding scientist of the field of chemistry. When he wasn't experimenting during this time, one other interesting discovery he made was soda water. He made the first carbonated beverages, and he was doing it thinking that he was going to cure scurvy for people on long voyages, which it didn't actually help him. But he never patented any of his techniques or anything. And shortly after he published his papers, they were patented by Schwepp, which is popular drugs. So kind of funny. When he wasn't experimenting during this time, he was likely listening to Franklin and some other Americans that he became correspondent with, such as Thomas Paine, arguing their case for American independence. And at this time, he's based out of England. So this argument had been circulating around American taverns and American coffee houses at the time. He also preached in small churches during this time, but he was offering controversial analysis of the divinity of Christ and the church's unwillingness to change over time, antithetical to his goal for progress. He was saying that the church should change and evolve over time as society learns new information and continues to evolve over time. Eventually, the friction between Britain and the colonies rose to the point that Franklin was dismissed from the Postmaster General of London, and he boarded a ship to Philadelphia, never to see London again. But even during this final voyage, Franklin was taking water temperature measurements as he traveled back across the ocean in correspondence with Priestley. They had discussed this a number of times. There was a certain aspect about the mail that really bothered Franklin when he was Postmaster General. Mail that went from the continent to England was almost twice as fast coming from England to the continent. The ships coming from England took almost twice as long as ships coming from the New World back to England. And Franklin theorized in writing to Priestley and taking these temperature readings that he suspected there was, quote, a stream of warm water that ran like a great river through the ocean, originating somewhere in the Southern Gulf. So even in getting expelled from London, he's making groundbreaking discovery of the Gulf Stream and writing about it to his geeky friends, the natural philosophers, one of which is Joseph Priestley. So while befriending Franklin so closely, let me just remind myself of my slides. This is his terrarium work here. Sorry. While befriending Franklin so closely, Priestley had to hide the sympathies he held for the colonists. He was less successful in hiding his rebellious religious views when he was preaching, which were possibly even more controversial during this time period than him sympathizing with the colonists. Somewhat related to his study of air and gas, he began thinking really deeply about what natural matters would compose the human soul. So he argued against the idea that humans were composed of 2 separate entities, a body and a soul. He dismissed that. He contended that humans could only be made of organic matter that is identifiable by science. And until science found this divine matter, that we couldn't say that we were 2 parts in one. In 1774, he assisted a close friend, Reverend Theophilus Lindsay, and founded the first Unitarian denomination. It was a church that openly denied the divinity of Jesus and openly denied the existence of the Trinity, and as you can imagine, made their lives a lot more complicated. This is during the Church of England. So Priestley transitioned into a new sort of hot streak, one where he was preaching and philosophizing about religious ideas that were counter to what the crown wanted. He wrote an entire volume entitled The History of the Corruptions of Christianity. In his piece, he attempted to peel back the layers of mysticism and mistranslation that the original biblical works had undergone, pinpointing the Council of Nicaea as a specific turning point, which he called corruptive, of the history of one man named Jesus and his philosophical teachings. So part of what he was trying to do is put Jesus on standing with Socrates and the Greek philosophers, and not elevate him into a godlike status, which he really had trouble with. Now he was becoming a Benjamin Franklin level figure all his own, and he was collecting his own disciples. No longer a regular at the Honest Whigs, he had moved to Birmingham and became a different centerpiece of a different social network called the Lunar Society, affectionately referred to as the Lunatics. When there was a dinner meeting planned among a community of the Lunatics in Birmingham, England, loyalists to the King's Church threatened to harm anybody attending this dinner. Priestley took the advice of his wife and didn't attend. The other attendees actually secretly met 3 hours before the original meeting time to avoid the friction. Nevertheless, locals formed a militia and they marched on Birmingham, burning 5 churches affiliated with Priestley's new religious movement and 27 homes, including Priestley's home. But when you think about it, his house was probably very easy to burn down because he had collected every artifact that created electricity and heat and boiled water and everything. So his house probably went down like a tinderbox. But these are known as the Birmingham riots, but they're also called the Priestley riots because it was specifically aimed at driving Joseph Priestley out. His family then moved to Leeds, but never quite felt safe. He was now known to be, he was outed as a sympathizer with the Americans and with the budding French Revolution as well. And he was labeled a heretic for his religious views. He found trouble preaching or publishing in any capacity. Around 1790, his now adult son had sailed to the New World and was writing to him about promising farmland available in Pennsylvania. So shortly after 1790, Joseph Priestley left England forever, just like his hero, Benjamin Franklin, and came to the United States looking for religious freedom from religious and political persecution, and settled somewhat randomly in Northumberland, PA. So he had major political figures, scientists, and religious leaders trying to encourage him to move to Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore. They were all kind of pulling him in different directions, and just kind of being like a little bit of an antisocial dude, just wanting to do his experiments on his own. He settled way out in the countryside of Northumberland. So just quickly as an aside for that, we are right now 100 miles from the house that he built with his wife in Northumberland. His wife actually died before the house was fully constructed, but she had really specific plans that she wanted in the house. And one of them that I learned about researching this is called a widow's walk, which is like a deck on the roof. And I didn't know this, but it's called a widow's walk because it originated in like Cape Cod and sailing towns where women would walk on the top of the house waiting for their husband if he was ever coming home to come home. The outbuilding of the house is his like laboratory with a bunch of artifacts. And then there's a Joseph Priestley Memorial Church that's not far from there, which is where he was preaching. But it's only 100 miles from here. I'm just reading this excerpt really quickly from the book. Priestley was a man at the very front lines of scientific achievement who was simultaneously a practicing minister and theologian, and who was, by the end of the 1770s, well on his way to becoming one of the most politically charged figures of anywhere on earth. He was an empiricist driven by a belief in God, who was simultaneously a revolutionary of the first order, denying certain aspects of mysticism. In today's culture, a Venn diagram of science, politics, and faith would show virtually no overlap, particularly if we're talking about individuals who hold radical views in all 3 of those different disciplines. There are plenty of politicians who have strong religious beliefs, and plenty of clergymen who have active and influential political careers. But the vast majority of that group is conservative in its values, in the most general sense of the word. They are attempting to conserve and protect some kind of traditional order. And the scientist politicians, Al Gore notwithstanding, are as rare as a scientist priest. If an echo of the intellectual chord Priestley managed to strike, political thinker, believer, scientist, and radical, still somehow resonates in America, it is because most of these notes were played in a slightly different configuration by the great polymath intellectual of the revolutionary generation, Thomas Jefferson. That the two men were in such harmony was no accident, as Jefferson himself borrowed some of the dominant notes from Priestley's score. So transitioning into the last 10 years of his life when he lived in Pennsylvania, he was hugely influential to both Thomas Jefferson and Adams, who were the FFs, and then had a huge falling out, and then later in life became friends again. It was Joseph Priestley's work that encouraged Jefferson to create what's called the Jefferson Bible. It's actually entitled The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth, but commonly referred to as the Jefferson Bible. And it's one of two religious works constructed by Jefferson. Jefferson compiled the manuscripts but never published them. The first, The Philosophy of Jesus of Nazareth, was completed in 1804, but no copies are in existence today. The second, called The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth, was completed in 1820 by Jefferson cutting and pasting literally with razor blades and gluing on paper. He cut up the Bible and glued his own version of it together. So there were numerous sections from the New Testament as extractions of the doctrine of Jesus. Jefferson's condensed composition excludes any miracle by Jesus and excludes any mentions of supernatural, including sections of the gospel that contain resurrection stories. And he removed any passage that portrayed Jesus as divine and tried to distill the Bible down to just Jesus's philosophical teachings. And when I think about that, and I look at the different principles of UUA and UUFP on a local level, I feel like there would be a huge amount of overlap between that. It focuses on his teachings as a philosopher, nothing more, nothing less. Around 1800, Jefferson and Adams, the two prominent founding fathers, were in the middle of a large falling out. Jefferson didn't agree with Adams' rhetoric and movements as president. And then shortly after Adams, Jefferson becomes president, and just like now, tries to undo a lot of what Adams had set up. So it's really interesting reading about that volatility as like a founding principle of our country, really. They had befriended each other in politics during the Continental Congress and the writing of Declaration of Independence, but later they became bitter rivals. Adams was president, pushed his agenda, which Jefferson detested, specifically the Alien and Sedition Act, which people were actually trying to use the Alien and Sedition Act to get Joseph Priestley, this controversial figure, deported from our country. So the beginnings of ICE, I don't know. As Unitarian, so at the end of their lives when when Jefferson and Adams rekindled their friendship, they wrote hundreds of letters back and forth. And there's some really cool statistics in this book that in the legendary 14-year final correspondence reflecting back on their collaborations and feuds, Thomas Jefferson and Adams wrote 165 letters to each other. In that corpus, Ben Franklin is mentioned by name 5 times. George Washington is mentioned by name 3 times. Their mutual nemesis, Alexander Hamilton, warrants only 2 references. Joseph Priestley, an Englishman who spent only the last decade of his life in the United States, is mentioned by name 52 times in these correspondences. That statistic alone gives some sense of how important Priestley was to our founding fathers, in part because he would play a defining role in the rift and ultimate reconciliation between Jefferson and Adams, and in part because his distinctive worldview had profound impact on both men just as it had on Franklin 3 decades prior. Yet today, Priestley is more than a footnote, is barely more than a footnote in most popular accounts of the revolutionary generation. So, I'm sorry, this is a little disjointed. As UUs, as Americans, we inherit not only the theological courage of Joseph Priestley, but also his boundless curiosity, his trust in human reason, his desire for progress. Priestley's life reminds us that faith and inquiry are not enemies, but partners in the ongoing search for truth. He lived as though the divine could be found not in dogma, but through the spirit of discovery, in the flicker of a candle, the breath of a mouse, the stubborn growth of a mint in glass. The shared correspondence between single people who share a vision or small communities committed to share ideals related to pursuing truth and innovation can make a huge difference in the world. Priestley teaches us that questioning authority, whether political, religious, or scientific, is a sacred act. He risked exile, violence, and isolation because he refused to silence his conscience or his intellect. His work calls us to live with that same kind of integrity, to truly pursue knowledge, even when it unsettles the comfortable or overturns the traditional. Like I was saying, the Priestley House is 100 miles from where we're standing right now. In trying to come to terms with why Joseph Priestley isn't more well known, because like I love American history and never really learned much about him, I think there might be like this is just my personal opinion, I think there might be this like Fox News element to the end of his life, because in his latter years of preaching, when he was in Pennsylvania, he became obsessed with the book of Revelation and was truly convinced that like the world was coming to an end. So he gave these kind of unhinged, all these people were coming to hear the Joseph Priestley preach, and they were walking away like, what was that? And he had like fallen on these really dark, perseverating on these really dark ideas. So I can't say for sure what made that switch go off. He was like near the end of his life and had been through a lot. But I think kind of the way his journey ended, it kind of sullied, he got like super radical, and it kind of sullied all his accomplishments. For modern UU, being more like Joseph Priestley might mean embracing the full spectrum of our principles, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the use of reason and compassion as our guides, the courage to speak what conscience demands, even when it costs us our comfort or our safety. It means welcoming new information, whether we never saw it coming or not, accepting new perspectives with open arms, celebrating new discoveries, not as threats to faith or threats to the old ways of being, but as evidence that our faith is alive. Perhaps most importantly, he highlights the interconnectedness of all lives, from the molecular scale at micro to the democratic scale at macro. Priestley's journey from England to Northumberland, PA, was not merely a flight from persecution, it was honestly a lifelong pilgrimage towards freedom, intellectual freedom, spiritual freedom, moral freedom. Today, we continue this pilgrimage every time we choose curiosity over certainty, every time we choose to have dialogue over dogma, every time we choose to have courage over conformity. And even every time we come and share coffee in our own coffee house at UUFP, and we try and sort through all the curveballs that life is throwing us, either in our local community or at large. In that sense, Joseph Priestley is not just a figure of history, but a living example of what it means to practice Unitarian Universalism in its truest form, to continue questioning, continue evolving, continue seeking truth and justice and love. I hope I can embody these ideas. Maybe so. Thanks for listening. Our next hymn is hymn number 145. It is called As Tranquil Streams. If you would stand as you are willing and able. I'm gonna do closing words, then the chalice, then joys and flows. I hope that's the order that's to speak. So our closing words are from Barbara Peskin. Because of those who came before, we ought, in spite of their failings, we believe. Because of and in spite of the horizons of their visions, we too dream. Let us go forward, remembering to praise, to live in the moment, to love might, and to bow to mystery. Do we do joys and sorrows and then the chalice? Or do we do joys?
You do whatever you want, it's okay.
Okay, yeah, we'll do joys and sorrows at the end so we can end the Zoom. So if we would extinguish our flame and don't have that on the slide. So we can see them.
We extinguish the light, the light of wisdom, the warmth of community, by the fire of commitment, these is every in our hearts and in our plans until we are together.
Sorry about that. Slide for that.